The relief column reached the ridge after dark. No one was there. No signal lamp. No sentries. No machine gun crew dug into the crest. No American voices answering from the foxholes. Only wind moving across the bare ground, mud pressed flat by boots, and fresh tire marks running down the reverse slope. The men in the relief column thought they had arrived late. Then they realized the ridge had been empty before they got there. That ridge was not famous. It had no church tower, no bridge, no name anyone back home would remember. But it held the flank of a battalion together. From its crest, a man could watch the road junction below, the supply track behind it, and the narrow valley German patrols would need if they wanted to slip around the American line. And now it was open. By midnight, German scouts had already found the gap. Radio traffic began to stack up. Who left the ridge? Who ordered the withdrawal? Where was Captain Marlowe's company? Why was the relief column arriving to empty ground? When Captain Robert Marlowe was finally reached, his answer was calm because he believed he had done exactly what he had been told. We held until dark, that was the order. But when the report reached George Patton, he did not look first at the withdrawal time. He looked at the original order. It did not say dark, it said relieved. Hold the ridge until relieved. Patton placed the two versions side by side. One word had moved a company off a ridge. One word had opened a battalion's flank. Then Patton asked the only question that mattered. Who changed the word? Patton's order had been simple because the ground was not. The ridge ran low across the valley like a dark shoulder of earth. Nothing grand enough to earn a name on most maps. From a distance, it looked like any other rise in the countryside. A line of frozen grass, broken fence posts, shell holes, and a few crooked trees bent by winter wind. But from the top, the reason for holding it became obvious. Below the ridge was a road junction. One road fed supplies forward. Another led back toward the battalion's rear. A third cut east through the valley, narrow enough for German patrols to use at night if the Americans stopped watching it. Whoever held the ridge did not just hold high ground, he held the eyes of the battalion. Captain Robert Marlowe's company had been placed there for that reason. His men dug shallow foxholes along the crest, set a machine gun near a broken cart track, and stretched telephone wire back toward the command post. They had been tired when they arrived. They were colder by noon. By late afternoon, they were stamping feeling back into their boots and watching the valley through field glasses that fogged every time a man breathed too hard. But they understood the assignment. Stay on the ridge, watch the junction, do not let the flank open. That was why Patton's original order used the word it used. Hold the ridge until relieved. Not until evening. Not until ammunition ran low. Not until the men believed the worst of the day had passed. Until relieved. That word carried a specific meaning. It meant another unit had to physically come up, take the ground, confirm the handover, and make sure the ridge never went empty between one company leaving and another arriving. In combat, that difference mattered. A position can be dangerous while occupied. It becomes more dangerous when abandoned. Patton knew that. His staff knew that. Any officer who had watched a flank collapse from one missing outpost should have known it too. So the order went into the chain clean. Hold the ridge until relieved. It left headquarters with the ridge still manned, the battalion flank still covered, and the relief movement scheduled but not yet complete. At that moment, the order still protected the men below. It told Marlowe's company exactly what mattered. Not the clock, not the darkness. The handover. The ridge could not be left empty. Then the order moved farther down the chain. And somewhere between Patton's desk and the men who needed his words exactly as given, one word stopped being treated like a condition and started being treated like decoration. Lieutenant Andrew Hayes received the order in a room that had too many voices in it. That was not an excuse. It was the condition under which the mistake found its opening. Maps lay across two tables. A field phone rang, stopped, then rang again before anyone had finished writing the last message. A runner waited near the door with rainwater dripping from his helmet onto the floorboards. Outside, shell bursts were distant enough not to stop work, but close enough to keep every man writing faster than he wanted to. Hayes was young, tired, and certain he understood the intent. The ridge had to be held through the evening. The relief company was expected after dark. The battalion needed the flank covered until then. In his mind, those facts began to press together until they felt like the same thing. They were not. The original order lay on the pad in front of him. Hold the ridge until relieved. Hayes copied the route reference, the company designation, the grid, and the timing notes. Then he paused at the last phrase. The runner was still waiting. Another message had to go out. Someone behind him was asking for a correction on artillery priority. Hayes shortened the sentence. Hold the ridge until dark. It looked cleaner. It sounded easier to pass by radio if the line broke up. It fit what he assumed would happen. Relief after dark. Hold until dark. Close enough. That was the mistake. In a staff room, close enough can look efficient. On a ridge, close enough can open a flank. Hayes did not mark the wording as paraphrased. He did not check back with the operations officer. He did not ask whether relieved meant physical handover rather than time of day. He did not stop to consider that darkness might arrive before the relief column did. The message went out. From Hayes's hand, to the runner, to the radio set, to the company command post on the ridge, the wrong word traveled with the authority of the right order. No one receiving it heard carelessness. They heard command. Captain Marlowe's clerk wrote it down exactly as transmitted. Hold until dark. Marlowe read it once, folded the slip, and placed it in his map case. He had no reason to suspect that one word was missing. He had no original copy beside it. He had no way to know Patton had given him a condition, not a clock. By the time the sun began to drop behind the valley, the mistake no longer looked like a mistake. It looked like an order. And men on the ridge were preparing to obey it. By dusk, the ridge had become a line of tired men and cold rifles. Captain Robert Marlowe's company had held it since morning. They had taken intermittent mortar fire, not enough to break them, but enough to keep every man low and angry. Dirt had collapsed into 2 foxholes. A machine gun team near the cart track had shifted position twice after German observers began walking rounds toward them. Telephone wire had been cut once and patched by a private who crawled 30 yards with a spool under his coat. The ridge was still theirs. That was the important part. Below them, the road junction had stayed covered. No German patrol had crossed the valley without being seen. No movement had reached the battalion's flank. For all the discomfort, the mud, and the shelling, Marlowe's men had done what the order told them to do. At least, the order they received. Hold until dark. Marlowe checked the slip again as the light began to go gray. The words were clear. No qualification. No attached relief note. No second message correcting it. He had been in the army long enough to know that men did not stay exposed on a ridge after dark unless the order required it. This order seemed to tell him the opposite. Prepare to pull back after dark. Sergeant Daniel Knox was near the machine gun when the word passed down the line. He heard the first foxhole repeat it, then the second, then the third. Pack what you can carry. Silent withdrawal. Move off the reverse slope. Knox looked down toward the road junction. Then back at the crest. Something bothered him. Not the withdrawal itself. Companies withdrew all the time. Positions changed hands. Night movement was part of the war. But the ridge was too useful to be left empty, even for an hour. It watched too much ground. It tied too many pieces of the battalion together. Knox walked to Marlowe, keeping low out of habit. "Sir." Marlowe was folding his map. "What is it? Who's replacing us?" Marlowe stopped for half a second. That was all. But Knox saw it. The captain looked toward the darkening valley, then back at the order slip. "It says hold until dark." "Yes, sir." "And it's dark." Knox did not argue. He knew better than to challenge a captain with a feeling. But he also knew ridges did not become less important because the sun went down. If anything, darkness made the gap easier to use. Marlowe read the slip one more time. There was no relief listed, no handover time, no incoming unit, only the sentence he had been given. Hold until dark. So Marlowe obeyed it. He ordered the withdrawal quietly, exactly the way a careful officer should. Machine gun last, wounded first. No noise on the crest, no lamps, no loose equipment left behind if it could be carried. By full dark, the foxholes were empty. The ridge had not been abandoned by cowardice. It had been abandoned by grammar. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. That was how the mistake hid itself. Marlowe's company moved down the reverse slope in small groups, just as trained men should. No lamps, no talking unless necessary. The machine gun team left last, dragging the weapon through wet grass, pausing twice when distant artillery flashed beyond the valley. Boots slipped in mud, canteens knocked softly against hips. Someone cursed under his breath when a wire caught his ankle. Then the ridge was empty. No one on the road below saw it at first. From a distance, a dark ridge looks the same whether it holds 50 men or none at all. The foxholes did not announce they had been abandoned. The machine gun position did not signal its absence. The crest simply became quiet in a different way. That difference reached the Germans first. A patrol came up through the lower orchard, 3 men moving slowly along the stone wall, stopping whenever the wind shifted. They expected a challenge. They expected a burst from the crest. They expected at least one nervous American rifleman to fire too early. Nothing came. The lead German crawled higher. Still nothing. He reached the first shallow foxhole and found it empty. The dirt still fresh where boots had kicked loose soil into the bottom. A ration wrapper lay half buried near the firing step. Telephone wire ran back across the slope, cut and loose. The patrol did not attack. It did something more dangerous. It reported. Within the hour, German movement began probing toward the ridgeline. Not a full counterattack yet. Just feelers. Men testing the dark. A flare rose once over the valley, pale and brief, and for 3 seconds, the road junction below looked exposed enough to make every American who saw it feel his stomach tighten. At Battalion, the radio net began to crowd. Relief column delayed. Ridge status unknown. Marlowe company displaced. German patrol contact near crest. Repeat. German patrol contact near crest. The relief column was still pushing through a churned road where one disabled truck had narrowed the lane. They had expected to take over a held position. Instead, they were moving toward ground the enemy may already have touched. That was when the harmless-looking word became real. Dark had arrived. Relief had not. And between those two facts sat an empty ridge, a blind road junction, and a battalion flank that had begun to open in the night. Marlowe had not run. His men had not broken. They had obeyed the order they received. But the battlefield did not care which version of the order was supposed to be true. By the time the first report reached Patton, the ridge had already been retaken. That did not make the mistake smaller. It only meant the army had been lucky enough to catch the damage before it became permanent. The relief column had pushed up through the dark, found German patrol signs near the crest, and reoccupied the position after a tense hour of confusion, flares, and shouted passwords between nervous men who should have been changing shifts, not guessing who owned the ground. The report on Patton's desk made the first version sound simple. Captain Marlowe's company had withdrawn from the ridge before relief arrived. That sentence alone could end a man's command if read by a careless superior. It had the shape of cowardice, or confusion, or poor judgment under pressure. Patton did not accept the shape. He asked for the orders. Major Thomas Greer brought the packet in before the morning briefing. Original operation note, transmitted message, radio log, company copy, relief column delay, German patrol contact near the crest. Patton let the pages sit for a moment, then put on his glasses and began reading. No one spoke. He read the German contact report first, then the relief timing, then Marlowe's statement. We held until dark. That was the order we received. Patton stopped there. Read me the order as I gave it. Greer opened the original note. Hold the ridge until relieved. Patton did not move. Again. Greer read it again. Hold the ridge until relieved. Patton turned his eyes to the company copy. Now read me the order they received. Greer's voice changed slightly. Not enough for a stranger to hear, but enough for every staff officer in the room to feel it. Hold the ridge until dark. The room went quiet in a different way. Not confused, ashamed. Patton took both papers and placed them side by side on the table. There was no need for a map at that moment. The battlefield was already visible in the words. Relieved meant a handover. Dark meant a clock. Relieved kept men on the ridge until another unit stood in their holes. Dark allowed the ridge to go empty the moment the light failed. Patton looked at the two lines for a long time. Then he looked up. Captain Marlowe obeyed what he was given. No one argued. That sentence removed the easy target from the room. The field commander had not invented the gap. He had followed the wrong version of an order carrying Patton's name. Patton tapped the company copy once. Who transmitted this? Greer answered. Lieutenant Hayes, sir. Patton's face stayed flat. Bring him in. The staff did not need to ask why. The mistake had a name now. Lieutenant Andrew Hayes entered the room with the face of a man who still hoped the matter was administrative. A mistake in wording. A rushed transmission. A message shortened under pressure. He had already built the explanation in his head before Patton asked the first question. The two orders lay on the table. Hold the ridge until relieved. Hold the ridge until dark. Patton did not point at them immediately. He let Hayes see both lines himself. That was worse. A man can defend himself against accusation. It is harder to defend himself against two pieces of paper sitting side by side, proving that something changed in his hands. Patton asked quietly, "Did you transmit the company order to Captain Marlowe?" "Yes, sir." "Read the original." Hayes looked down. "Hold the ridge until relieved." "Now read what they received." Hayes swallowed. "Hold the ridge until dark." Patton waited. Hayes began carefully. "Sir, the situation was moving quickly. The relief was expected after dark. Radio traffic was heavy, and I believed the meaning would be understood." Patton's expression did not change. "You believed." Hayes stopped. Patton leaned slightly over the table. "Did I say dark?" "No, sir." "Did I say relieved?" "Yes, sir." "Then you changed my order." The words landed flat, not loud, not theatrical. Flat was worse, because flat meant Patton was no longer testing the facts. He had reached them. Hayes tried one more time. "Sir, I considered it a minor wording difference." Several officers in the room looked down. Patton did not. A dead man cannot tell the difference is minor. No one spoke after that. Patton picked up the company copy. Dark is a time. Relieved is a condition. A clock cannot hold a ridge. A handover can. Hayes stood rigid now, the confidence draining from his face. Patton continued. Captain Marlowe obeyed the order he received. His sergeant saw the danger, but the paper gave him no relief unit, no handover, no reason to hold past dark. He dropped the copy back on the table. You turned a tactical condition into a timetable. That was the whole failure. Not treason, not panic, not cowardice. Sloppy confidence. The kind that lives in staff rooms, where men touch maps and messages and sometimes forget that the words they adjust become boots moving in mud, machine guns leaving crests, and patrols finding gaps in the dark. Patton gave the order before Hayes could speak again. Lieutenant Hayes was removed from message duty pending review. No operational condition would be paraphrased without confirmation. Repeat back procedures would be tightened. Field commanders would receive exact wording when withdrawal, relief, or position-holding orders were involved. Patton did not punish grammar. He punished the careless hand that had changed command into assumption. By noon, the ridge was manned again. A machine gun was back on the crest. Telephone wire had been repaired. The relief company had taken over the foxholes that should never have been empty. Down in the valley, the road junction was again under American eyes. On the map, the line looked restored. Patton knew better. A restored line did not erase the gap that had existed in the dark. It did not erase the German patrol that had reached the crest first. It did not erase the hour of radio confusion, the relief column climbing toward uncertain ground, or the battalion flank sitting open because one order arrived with the wrong word inside it. Captain Marlowe was not removed. That surprised some of the staff. But Patton had no interest in easy punishment. Marlowe had received an order. He had held the ridge until the time written on it. He had withdrawn quietly, preserved his company, and followed the wording passed down to him under Patton's authority. The failure was not in the foxholes. It was in the chain. So Patton tightened the chain. No operational condition was to be paraphrased without confirmation. No order involving withdrawal, relief, or position holding could be shortened for convenience. Repeat-back procedures would be enforced. If an order said relieved, the receiving officer would repeat relieved. If a position required physical handover, no staff man would turn it into a clock because the message looked cleaner that way. Lieutenant Hayes was taken off message duty pending review. No speech followed. Patton did not need one. The 2 slips of paper had done enough talking. Hold the ridge until relieved. Hold the ridge until dark. They were almost the same length. They used almost the same words. But one kept men on the ridge until another unit stood in their place. The other sent them away when the sun disappeared. That was the lesson the staff carried out of the room. Orders are not decorations. Words are not filler. A phrase in headquarters becomes boots in mud. A missing condition becomes an empty foxhole. A changed word can move a company before the enemy fires a shot. Patton did not punish Hayes for bad grammar. He punished him because carelessness had worn the uniform of command. A rifle can miss. A shell can fall short. A truck can break an axle in the road. Those are accidents war understands. But when an officer changes the words of an order, he changes the battlefield itself. And for 1 hour in the dark, a battalion almost paid for that word. What would you have done in Patton's place? Blame the captain who obeyed the order he received, or the lieutenant who changed it before it ever reached him?